Okay, the session is being recorded, so we don't want to wait too long because of time. I'll invite Albert to take over from here. Albert.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Albert. Yeah, so good morning, team. I hope you are doing well. Welcome to today's session. So we are looking into the web security. Generally, Albert had informed me that at least we have a combined class together with the web application or the application development team, just to have them understand what are some of the security perspective or the security consideration that they need to put into their development process. So I know my voice hasn't been well since last week, over the weekend, and even this week. But I'll try my best at least to ensure that we get you get me, yeah. So I don't know whether you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen on this end.
Yeah, sure. So that's fine. So it's not a presentation per se, but just an overview of the OWASP top 10, or generally the frameworks that guides security controls within the web development or the web application development. So I'll take you through these a number of techniques, or generally a number of frameworks, a number of sorry. So I'll take you through a number of key considerations that you need to put into place. The good thing is that when it comes to cybersecurity, you remember, I think previously during maybe the initial presentations that I have had with the security team, and also I'll give this information out to the web application team, is that security is a very big domain. That's one. And even somebody who is in web application security is still within cybersecurity. So even when you want to specialize, maybe once you are well equipped in terms of web development, what happens is that you can transition into cybersecurity. You don't have even to maybe the only thing that you need to capture is to understand maybe the attack techniques and how to secure the web applications. Yeah. So it is an opportunity for you people, because what I know is that some guys come in from web development into cybersecurity. Some guys come in from networking. Some guys come in from systems administration into cybersecurity. Others come in from the initial stage whereby you go the long path, which you go through IT support. Maybe you become a network admin somewhere, but ultimately you find yourself within cybersecurity. Now, what is the path looks like for a web developer? Yeah, so today you are a web developer, but you never know. 2 years, 3 years down the line, once you are well equipped in your web development, you can pursue the path of becoming a cybersecurity expert within the application track. Yeah, because mostly I know from a banking experience, we have dedicated team that does we normally call them not necessarily web, but we call them application security. So they normally do the app assessment. So whenever, even during the development, all the applications needs to go through their their end in terms of testing all the security capabilities. Now, what do they use in terms of the testing? Because one thing you need to understand is that when it comes to cybersecurity, we normally rely a lot on frameworks, because at the end of the day, you are not originator of anything in cybersecurity. Even in IT, I know most of the things, it's so hard for you to be an originator. You can't come up today with your own programming language. we are leveraging on the works of other people. So when it comes to web application, or generally we can just call it application security, we try to leverage on frameworks. Even when it comes to anything within cybersecurity, we really rely on frameworks, because it is through the frameworks that we will achieve a number of regulations and even compliance. Remember, mostly from a governance perspective, or even from a regulatory perspective, we normally align mostly with frameworks. So we have the general framework that most people use within cybersecurity. It's either you use ISO standard or ISO 27001. I believe you have had that somewhere. The other one is on we can still use NIST. We have a framework called NIST CSF, so cybersecurity framework. So that's another amazing framework that you can use in terms of guiding you in implementing security controls. Now, what happens when it comes to applications? Yeah, because that's where now our interest is for today. So even when it comes to applications, we have got a very amazing framework. We call it OWASP Top 10. Yeah. So what happens is that all the this framework has been developed to provide us with details in terms of securing all generally securing any vulnerabilities within an application. Yeah. So at the end of the day, if you align your development in line with this framework, I believe you will be building not only amazing applications, but also a very secure application. Because at the end of the day, remember, you can build a very good application, but with a lot of loopholes or a lot of vulnerabilities. And that's where now you might end up losing or dropping the ball. So what I would want us now to go through is just go through this framework, the OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. So it was developed some time back, and majorly it has got 10 areas of attack, or 10 areas of vulnerabilities. So you can have vulnerabilities in a web application across 10 areas. So within those 10 areas, if you are able to develop an application as a web developer, once you develop such an application, are you able to have that application taken through, or generally have the application tested across the 10 key areas of application security, right? So, so what are the importance of the web application security? So I just want us to go through the overview there. So remember, at the end of the day, you are building applications that will be used to service or to provide services to critical, it provides services to critical amenities, or generally critical functions within a business. Yeah. So assume today somebody who built eCitizen, remember how critical eCitizen is to the government of Kenya, and assuming that application doesn't have security controls that are required, and in terms of the availability, so mostly maybe the application is not available. So at the end of the day, maybe I remember sometime last year, we had a lot of issues with eCitizen, because it was experiencing a lot of DDoS attack. Yes, that was one of the item which the process of deployment of that eCitizen platform was, there are a few security controls that were not put in place. And we will be able to look at those. So that now you will understand, as you deploy your application, there are some security control, security infrastructure that come into play for the platform where you will deploy your application. So as we'll be going through this, I'll be able to take you through what happened for the eCitizen, and at what point did they fail to provide those controls on the platform or during the deployment. Now, so so those are some of the other important thing about web application security is that, remember, in anything to do with cybersecurity, it's because we are working towards protecting systems, protecting applications, or generally, we were discussing yesterday with my team. It's generally protecting organization assets. Yeah. When it comes to assets, we are talking of softwares, we are talking of application, we are talking of data, we are talking of people, we are talking of hardware. All those are assets that an organization has. And as a cybersecurity personnel, you need to have or to be in a position to protect those assets. Now, all applications generally becomes also the portfolio or generally a part of the assets of an organization. And as a web developer or as an application app developer, what are some of the key things that at the end of the day, you build applications that they are well trusted, they are well provide services without even a lot of inch, like the e-citizen that you have. So we will go through some of the common threats and vulnerabilities within applications. Yeah, so I believe I'll just touch what's a threat, what's a vulnerability. Yeah, at least you understand. When we talk of a vulnerability within an application, what are we talking about? And when we talk of a threat, what are we talking about? And we talk of a threat actor taking advantage of a vulnerability. What does that imply? So I don't know, so far, is there anybody who has got a question? Before now, we just go through the common threats and vulnerabilities, and then we jump into the OWASP top 10. So we'll go through each and every item of our OWASP top 10. So there are 10. So we'll be looking at what are some of the examples of each. So definition, example, and impacts in case of successful exploitation of that particular item or of that particular item within the OWASP top 10. What are some of the potential impacts to the organization or even to the application? And ultimately, yes, once the application is impacted, it will transpire now to the business, and even the business can start now losing money, or even from a reputation perspective, that will be another thing. So anybody who has got a question so far? So maybe
just
Albert,
raise your hand if you have a question so that I can give you the microphone.
Yeah, perfect. So if there's none, we can proceed. So I want to define what's a vulnerability and what's a threat. Yeah, so mostly when it comes to cybersecurity, or when it comes to information security, we normally chase against vulnerabilities, because it is through vulnerabilities that we are exposed, or generally our assets are at the point of being potentially exploited. So when we talk of a vulnerability, we normally say a vulnerability is a weakness in a system, or a vulnerability is a weakness within a system, a process, an application, or an asset. Yeah. So in totality, remember, when we talk of asset definition as an organization, we are talking of people, people, applications, data, hardware, softwares. So yesterday, maybe just in terms of, I can quickly say, maybe we have, like, this Zoom is an asset to our organization. So at the end of the day, do we have controls, or do we have security controls for our Zoom application, which is a third, it's a SaaS application that we have bought as an organization, and it is an asset for us. So we need to protect that asset. So now, in case there is any vulnerability within this asset, which is in case there is a weakness in terms of configuration, maybe there's a misconfiguration on the Zoom, there's a misconfiguration on your application, that becomes a weakness. And a threat actor normally takes advantage of that weakness, right? So what happens is this. Now we need to discuss what's a threat. Yeah. Say that now, once you understand a vulnerability is a weakness within a system, or a weakness within an asset that needs to be protected. A threat is something that takes advantage of the available weakness. Yeah. So a threat will take advantage of any available weakness within a system, within an asset, and it can the threat can completely take over or control that system once it's exploited. So a threat is any potential exploit of a vulnerability. Any potential exploit of a vulnerability becomes a threat. Now, with that in mind, it means once you have your application well developed, you need now to take it through security assessment, or generally some security testing. So it means you are on pursuit of looking of what are some of the weaknesses within this application that can be exploited by a threat actor and take control of the whole application. So those are some of the things that becomes key when now you are doing your application security assessment. And with this framework now, it means your work is much easier, because one of the things that we really, as a cybersecurity or generally as an application security person, there are a number of things that you can take advantage of, like this framework. So there are tools that are meant to test applications from a security perspective, and most of these tools, they have it has this framework built into the tool itself, right? So you realize that at the end of the day, sorry for that. So at the end of the day, you realize that even the tools that have been built, or generally the tools that have been developed by some security providers, they have this framework built into it. So at the end of the day, you realize that you will have something like Babsuit. I think maybe you have interacted with Babsuit at some point in your process of development. You can have something like vulnerability scanning platforms or tools. We have Tenable, we have Qualys. So with those tools, they have the OWASP top 10 built into it. So at the end of the day, you can take advantage even of the open source. We have the Babsuit. Babsuit is an open source application testing, application security testing tool, and it has OWASP top 10 built into it. So your work is just to scan. So you initiate a scan, it goes through all your web forms, or not even web forms, but web pages. So assuming your application has got like 100 different pages. So what's the scanning tool will do, it will scan each and every page against the security configuration, or against the security baseline of the OWASP top 10. Yeah. So those are some of the things that at the end of the day, you should start working on in terms of once you build an application, you are good to go. I've downloaded the community version of Babsuit. It's a good thing. Have all these OWASP top 10 built into it, and even other frameworks. You can have even the CIS framework, CIS baseline, it's built into it. So those are some of the things that they have been developed, and they are meant to help you in building secure applications. Now, I think we still have, whenever you build your application and you have it on your CI/CD pipeline. So I know some you can use your GitHub as part of where you will host all your code reviews and everything. So what happens is that also on GitHub, we normally have some open source or generally free security testing tools. Yeah. So you can review your code. You can review your code using some add-ons within GitHub, and then it will be able to provide you. I believe even there is one for OWASP. It can't miss there, because OWASP is something free. So not unless maybe somebody has built a custom one or a premium one, and it has integrated OWASP in a simpler way. But at the end of the day, GitHub definitely might have done so. Yeah. So the other thing is on, you will realize that we have different CI/CD pipelines. So if you are developing your application on AWS CI/CD pipeline, or you are developing your application on even even the Azure CI/CD pipeline and many other CI/CD pipelines. We normally have a plugin for, we call this DevSecOps. Yeah. So through the development life cycle or within the CI/CD pipeline, you realize that we have a security component that was introduced a few years ago. So that now it was initially only DevOps, development and operations, but ultimately security was missing and it was later plugged in into most of the CI/CD pipelines. So normally you can be a specialist, of DevSecOps, even from you don't need as a web developer. Actually, you have got a lot of opportunities within the application portfolio of getting to explore or generally transitioning into cybersecurity field. Yeah, so you can be part of DevSecOps. So within the CI/CD pipeline, there will be developers, there will be the side of operations in terms of managing the application after deployment and everything. There will be the developers who will be doing upgrades, all those other things in terms of improving the application. But at the end of the day, also, you can be a security component, or you can be a security core person within the CI/CD or within the DevOps pipeline, and now that is called DevSecOps. So for you, you will be doing code reviews from a security perspective within the CI/CD pipeline. Yeah. So I want us to go into the first item, which is injection. So I don't know whether there's anybody who has got a question so far. I think there's none, Albert.
I don't see any hand raised.
Okay.
Unless someone has a question.
Okay.
Just raise your hand and I'll give you the microphone.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so let's just because I don't think whether we might have a session to do question and answer at the end of the meeting. So you can in between there, you can just raise your hand and ask some questions. So now the first item is injection. So normally when you build an application, we have got different vulnerabilities within the application, and it can take the perspective of kind of mostly the injection. So from a definition perspective, injections are flaws occurs when untrusted data is sent into an interpreter as part of a command or a query, right? Yeah. So mostly you realize that what happens with this is that as you build your applications, majorly there's a DB, maybe a DB behind the app, right? And the backend side of the application will be receiving inputs from the front end. So with that process of data transmission from backend into from front end to backend, it counts part of the injection, right? More so in terms of a lot of communications to the DB. So you realize that we have got examples like SQL injections that are majorly they are core, or it contributes the largest portfolio of injections or injection attacks. So we have got SQL injections, we have got no SQL injections as well, we have OS injections, and we have got LDAP injections. So in terms of SQL injections, for your interaction, your application interacting with a DB, have you initiated or have you added some controls in terms of your application interacting with the DB? What are some of the security controls that you have put into place that say that at the end of the day, when it comes to the application interacting with the DB, they interact on a secure platform, or generally they interact on a secure transit or a secure channel, right? Yeah. So some of the things with your scanning, once you scan based on OWASP top 10, you don't have even to do any configurations from your side or from the tool itself. You just scan using a tool that has OWASP top 10 built into it. So what it will do, it will test all SQL, all possible SQL injections, all possible no SQL injections, all possible OS injections, all possible LDAP injections. Now, let me touch a little bit on the LDAP injections. Sorry. So what happens with the LDAP injections is that, remember, when you build an application, there is the aspect of users authenticating to the application, right? And majorly, you can build an application whereby it has got the inbuilt addition of users. So you can be adding a user to the application, and you will be able to authenticate to the application. The other thing is you can have an ADP, we call it an ADP. So ADP is what happens is that you can have a trusted source of authentications to your application. So normally what happens is that when you build an application, you can have your trusted source of identity as an active directory. So what you will do is you will integrate your application with an active directory, so that now anybody wants to log into the application must exist within the active directory. And remember, active directory is the true source, or generally the identity of the organization. Even when you are doing something like SSO integration, you normally identify your IDP. Now, with LDAP injection, it means if you don't do that integration properly, you might end up having a lot of LDAP requests coming from the application going to the authenticating or to the trusted source of identity within the application. So you will be experiencing a lot of authentications generated from the applications to the AD, or even the vice versa. So somebody's trying to maybe somebody can check about, he knows that our AD has got, let's say, 500 users. So he tries to do LDAP requests across the 500 users that are maybe authorized to access the application. So that's counts for LDAP injection. So what I would want you to do is just go and study how does your applications, how does users authenticate to your application? Is it built in, whereby you create users internally, or is it external, whereby you depend on an an external ADP or IDP? Now, what happens in case of successful injections or successful exploitation of these through injections, SQL injection, no SQL injection? So definitely, we might end up having data theft, loss, or corruption, because one, remember, most of these interactions for injections goes to the DB. So you might end up having your DB corrupted, and definitely the data within the DB gets corrupted. You might end up having the data within the DB being exfiltrated as well. So somebody can do an SQL connection or an SQL request. So once you do an SQL request, which doesn't have even authorization, it doesn't have even authentication, you will end up having somebody even just downloading records from your DB, using the SQL request. So you can put an SQL to download some critical data within the DB. So that becomes data theft, loss, and corruption. So the other one is unauthorized access to sensitive data. Yeah, definitely. If you are building interaction from the front end to the back end, which is the DB, at the end of the day, without authorization, without even any authentication, it means at the end of the day, anybody can quickly utilize the front end to interact with the back end, because there is no authentication to the back end. You end up having a lot of unauthorized access to sensitive data. And the other thing is the complete system compromise, because one, somebody can use this capability and at the end of the day, be able to take control of all your DB, and from there, takes control of the DB, cuts off the application from interacting with the DB, and it takes full control of the DB. So your application will be rendered useless, because at the end of the day, it doesn't have any interaction to any DB. So upon the unapata, at the end of the day, you lose the application, you lose the data itself, even the data that is within the DB. So it can lead also to complete system compromise. So what are some of the options that we have in place in terms of closing this loophole, of preventing these techniques? Now, the other thing I want to touch on is in terms of the OWASP, we normally, the good thing about it is that they give you recommendations on whatever that they have identified as an issue. They normally give you where the issue is within the application, specific page, and also they also tell you, or they also provide some recommendations on what to do exactly in terms of, is it you need to do maybe some authentication? Do you need to do some parameterized queries, or do you need to do some validation or sanitize all user data inputs? Yeah, so those are some of the things that the OWASP will provide. So we have got the first one technique there is to use parameterized queries and prepared statements. Yeah. So the other thing you use is object relational mapping frameworks, and then validate and sanitize all user input. So these are some of the things that within the framework itself, it guides you on what to do exactly. If it tells you you need to validate, it also shows you what do you need to validate within your input controls, or the specific control that you really need to implement so that now your application becomes secure. So the good thing is that you don't have to struggle a lot, because at the end of the day, so long as you understand what the frameworks gives you and how to use the framework, in terms of, once I identify something, I can go to the framework, see on the recommendations on how to close that issue. And then now you can go ahead and implement. Once you implement the control, you can also start the retesting option. So I want us to proceed to the second item, which is the broken authentication. Yeah. So so far, yeah. So just in case anybody has got a question, please raise your hand, and we'll be able to respond. Now, so the broken authentication is the second item. So this one focuses on generally the authentication part. Remember, authentication is really wide, because you can have the user authentication, you can have API authentication as well. So because at the end of the day, maybe you are building an application that will interact with a third party, or it will interact with a number of other applications. So definitely you will have a lot of API integrations to your application. Now, are you able to do some authentication to those APIs? The other thing is, are you able to do some authentication even to the normal authentication to the system, or the normal access authentication to the application? Yeah. So you have even username, password. Also, have you added some additional security controls on top of just normal username and password? Do you have the capabilities of MFA within the application? The other thing is, I have talked of some even auth applications. So what happens nowadays, we have got modern authentications. We call them modern authentications, whereby we use auth authentications, open authentications. So have you adopted that? Sometimes we talk of SSO integrations as well. So are you using maybe the SSO authentication within your application? So generally, if you have got an issue within the authentication portfolio, or if you have an issue within the authentication domain, you will end up having once you scan, you will end up having those findings. So we have got the broken authentication allows attackers to gain unauthorized access to the system, definitely, because one, if even your authentication doesn't do some validations, yeah, somebody can just, instead of putting even an email, they just put a username, yeah, which is not, maybe the username is an email, but yours now, it just accept anything as a username, yeah, and also it can accept anything as a password in terms of the length. So maybe even with 2 characters, it's a password. No. So those are some of the things. So examples are weak password, improper session management, credential stuffing. Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about session management. Yeah. So does your application have like you don't have session we call them, I think they are cookies. So what happens is that once you authenticate and you are offered a token, does it have a life cycle, lifetime, yeah, expiry? So maybe your token can last as long as forever. That's a risk, because it means if I manage to steal that token, I can easily authenticate to that application and still have persistent access continuously. But if you have set your system in a way that the token will expire within a day or within maybe hours, so anybody even without an active session for a specific period of time, maybe without the system doesn't experience any activity or any active session within like 20 minutes, it should log out and the user will come back and log in again. So those are some of the security controls that you really need to factor in when you are managing the authentication, or generally even once the user authenticates and successfully has gained access to the system with the tokens that the user has been issued. What is the lifetime of that token? Are you able to expire that token in case of this inactivity? Credential staffing, yes. So at the end of the day, do you have a capability of just in case somebody pushes a lot of, we normally call them credential, it's kind of a DDoS. So you normally try a number of passwords. It's not my password attacks. Yeah. So you try a lot of passwords within one username, try a number of other passwords within another username. So those are some of the things that you really need to consider. So what are some of the impacts? And for any successful exploit, we'll end up having unauthorized access to user accounts. Definitely. You can, if you are building a system whereby it only requires 2 characters as a password, complexity of the password becomes another thing. Are you doing alphanumeric passwords for your system? So that now at the end of the day, the user will try to put, I don't know, uh, maybe today is it's August. Maybe somebody has put even a password as nane nane. So does your system accept those? Because at the end of the day, those are some of the simple passwords that can easily lead to system being compromised. Yeah. So if you are building systems that doesn't support alphanumeric, it just support weak passwords, that's an issue. Yeah. So somebody puts nane nane as the password and your system just accept that. It doesn't even request for a character, a special character. It doesn't even request for a number. So that's an issue. That's an issue. Even the length. Yeah. Even the length. Now, data breach and identity theft and compromise of multiple accounts using the used password. So that's another thing. If do you have kind of expiry in terms of, now you will be accessing this system using this password, but definitely after 30 days, 60 days, you will need to set up a new password. So those are some of the things that you look into the authentication side of things. Now, the other best practice to secure authentication, so you can implement multi-factor authentication. That's another thing. So you don't just build a system whereby it only uses username and password. Nowadays, we really need the second factor of authentication. So you can build a system that uses, if you are a web or an Android developer, or even generally any other application, build a system that will use fingerprint, build a system that will use SMS authentication, a system that will use even the push. And we have now a lot of auth applications, not authenticators. Huh? So we have Google Authenticator, we have a number of open source authenticators that you can utilize. Now, the other thing is ensure password storage. So how do you, once you build your system, where do you store the passwords? Yeah, so definitely you might be storing them in the DB. Are the data within, is it being encrypted? Are the passwords being hashed? That's another thing. So that now at the end of the day, just in case the system is compromised, they cannot easily access the password because the passwords has been hashed at least. But if you are building a system where everything is plain, no encryption, that's an issue. That's an issue. And then the secure session management. Remember when we talked about expiry of tokens, ensuring that at the end of the day, you have the passwords or you have the tokens being expired. Being expired at least. Usibuild system yenye tokens inaweza tumika for a whole year. No, even tokens can be used. So have that session management using the tokens. At least at the end of the day, once an authentication or a successful authentication has been authorized, you have tokens that will expire at the end of the day. Yes, just to ensure that the session is being managed. Now, let's look into number 3, sensitive data exposure. Now, so what happens with this one is the way your application how does your application maintain its data? Yeah, so maybe your application is processing PII information, it's processing financial data. Yeah, umebuild application ina interact na M-Pesa vizuri sana. So at the end of the day, it will interact with M-Pesa systems. So definitely it will have financial records within the system. You have built a payment application. So how is that? The other thing is you have built an health record system. So umeiva vizuri, umebuild, we normally call it hospital management information system, HMIS. You have built a very good HMI system, but at the end of the day, have you put into consideration that you are dealing with patient data, very critical data? You need to even be under the regulations of HIPAA. So those are some of the things. Are you adhering to the HIPAA? HIPAA will give you some recommendations, no, not recommendation, but it will give you some guidelines on what to do with applications that will manage health information, or generally that will manage health records, right? Yeah, so for sensitive data exposure, you will scan, and then within the OWASP top 10 application, or within the OWASP top 10 systems that have got OWASP top 10 built into it, they will be able to see whether there is any data exposure, PII, financial or health. So this includes an encrypted data. So now, does your application encrypt data at transit? Does your application encrypt data on rest, at rest, right? Yeah, so those are some of the things that you need to put into consideration: improper access control and weak encryption. So the other thing, what are some of the encryptions that you are using? What are some of the encryptions that you are using in terms of, are you using weak encryptions? Are you using at least strong encryptions? So within the programming modules, or generally within the programming softwares, it normally gives you those options on which encryptions that you can use, and within your application. Yeah, so what happens in case of successful exploitation, identity theft, financial fraud, legal and regulatory penalties? Yes, let me talk of number 2, because number 1 is obvious for any application. It's more like even the same as the first item that you were discussing, even loss of user trust and reputational damage. But I want to talk of the item number 2, legal and regulatory penalties. Now, today, you have managed to be a very good web developer. Not even, just let me just talk of an application developer. When I talk of a web developer, application developer, ni kitu moja. So we're in short, as in, like, when I talk of generally, I'm talking of an app developer. Now, today you have built a software, you have built an app, a good app that does the HMIS system. Let me check even HMIS system, health management information system. Now, without your consideration of HIPAA, you see now, such an application will be regulated by, or guidelines for health information are normally regulated by, not regulated by, but guidelines on the processing of health information is normally needs to be compliant to HIPAA requirements. Now, for you, I'll just build a system, even it normally goes into how secure is the system. So HIPAA will give you a number of security recommendations that you need to comply with for it to be accepted to process health information. The same applies to a financial. Today, when you build a system that will be used by a bank, today, when you build a system that will be used by a SACCO, today, when you build a system that will be used by any financial institution, today, when you build a system that will be processing financial data, there is something called PCI. So long as that system will be requesting for you know the card numbers, zile zinakuwa kwa ATM nini nini, or the day that system will be processing any financial data, PCI will be on your neck. And remember, this PCI, if you are building a software that needs to be integrated with PayPal, you are building a system that needs to be integrated with Visa, you are building a system that needs to be integrated with MasterCard. MasterCard will tell you, even I don't know whether Safaricom has gone to this step. But from a global perspective, I know if you are building this system that's require PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, also MasterCard and Visa, because you will be processing card numbers, you will need to be compliant with PCI. Yeah. So with PCI, there are a number of minimum security compliance that you need to follow. So PCI will, even for them, they normally have PCI assessors locally here in Kenya. So anytime you build those now, in case you are not certified or you haven't passed PCI requirements, you will not be allowed to integrate that system with those providers, MasterCard, Visa, or even PayPal. I don't know of M-Pesa. I really need to look into that. Or maybe I don't know whether we have a developer who has done that and they have been required by Safaricom or by M-Pesa to do some PCI requirements or PCI compliance. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. So in case you build those systems and it doesn't meet the minimum PCI, IPA, you will end up being on the legal side of things. Yeah, so you might end up facing some legal suits and even regulatory compliance. So you can be penalized by CBK. So as a financial institution, you are running applications that are not PCI compliant. Once the organization loses data or any fraud happens within the organization, you will end up having penalties from CBK. So CBK will give you some penalty. In case you don't want to pay the penalty, your license will be revoked, and thereafter you end up losing business. So those are some of the key things that you need to look into now. So prevention techniques: use strong encryption on data in transit at rest. Use proper access controls. Yes, definitely access controls becomes still a key thing. And then ensure secure handling and storage of sensitive data. So where does your data, where it is being stored, is it a secure environment? Is it secure in terms of well encrypted, just in case even if you lose that data, somebody will not have access to it because it was encrypted. Now let's go to number 4: XML entities or sorry XML entities, external entities. Now we normally have or we normally talk of these XML in terms of remember, your application normally has got a lot of interactions with other applications or external applications. So what happens with this is that what happens with XML is that you end up having to build something called like an XML parser. Yeah. So the way your application will be interacting with other applications. Huh? So at the end of the day, with this one, you need to have kind of an entity that processes or when your application is exchanging data with another application via the XML platform or XML channel, what are some of the security controls that you have put in place, yeah, just to ensure that that avenue is well catered for? So that now, if your application can even not filter data, it can consume some dirty data from other applications. Yeah, so you haven't built a parser to your application. So at the end of the day, a lot of inputs that come into application might even be dirty data, and then it will tamper with your local application or even your local data. So those are some of the things that you really need to look out for. So what happens with this one is that there are a number of in terms of the parser itself. Whenever your application is exchanging data with another application, have you put into consideration those controls in place? That now you are even doing data. I normally see sometimes there's something called data cleanup. So even before your application consumes some data from another application, you ensure that that data is clean. Yeah, so you do the whole sanitization of that data. So what are some of the examples for this one? So we have got reading local files, making internal network requests, or even you might end up having some DDoS attacks within the application, just because we normally talk of something called buffer overflow attack. For this one, even if you are just receiving data, you have configured your system in such a way that it can receive a specific amount of data at a go, but because you haven't controlled that avenue, you end up your system end up being bombarded with a lot of data and become something called a buffer overflow attack. So impacts, we still have unauthorized access to internal files and systems. Yes, so if an application is interacting with your application and it is supposed to be posting some data to that application. So you see, you might end up having your internal system, some of your internal systems or internal files that were not supposed to be consumed by the other application being accessed. So the other thing is on SSRF, so server-side request forgery. So even somebody can end up creating a different other application to interact with the application just because you don't secure your API interface. Yeah, you don't secure your API interface. So at the end of the day, I know, yes, there's the API interaction within applications, and then we can still have the XML-based interaction between applications. So have you secured that channel? And then we finally have the DDoS, so denial of service. That's common across almost any application or any track here. So mitigations, you need to disable some document type definitions in XML parser. I'm starting to lose my voice again. Okay. So the other thing is use less complex data formats such as JSON. Yeah, so the JSON, use JSON file for when you are posting data to from one application to the other application. And then you can do validate and sanitize all XML inputs. Yeah, so ensure any data that goes into your application is well sanitized. Broken access control. Yeah, so we are at this. So in terms of the access control, so definitely this goes into do you have some controls within within the application? So now we have somebody who is an administrator within the application. We have somebody who is also an we have somebody who is just a normal user. We might be having who is also a normal user as just a reader within the application, or we need a super admin as well. Yeah. So how have you done your access control within the within the application? Is it that somebody who is just a normal user can perform some privileged roles within the application? Yes, maybe a normal user sometimes can even execute some super admin functions within the application. So those are some of the things we call the broken access control. So broken access controls occur when restrictions on authenticated users are not properly enforced. So you end up having somebody who is just a normal user, sometimes a push functions are admin. Somebody who is an admin and a push functions are super admin. So those are some of the discrepancies that you really need to look out for when you are building your application. So examples: insecure direct objects reference or missing function label access control. So normally with this one, I want you to look into something called RBAC. Try to have your system compliance to RBAC at any given time, right? Yeah. So what happens? What happens for in terms of prevention of this? So you can use list privileges, role-based access control. I've talked of RBAC. So try understand how to utilize list privileges and RBAC whenever you are building your systems, or generally whenever you are coming up with access controls within the system. So perform regular access control reviews and use security frameworks that enforce access control. Now, let's proceed to number 6, security misconfigurations. Security misconfigurations. Now, what happens is that whenever you build a system, definitely you will have these security configurations. These security configurations cuts across authentication, access control, encryption. So you might end up missing some of these controls, or you might end up having them not functional, right? Not functional. So you realize that once you build a system that has got a lot of security misconfigurations, so even if a best case example is maybe it has a misconfiguration on access control. So it means a normal user can perform admin functions. A normal user can still do some roles that are not meant for the normal user. That's one example of a security misconfiguration. The other thing is you have configured your system to have MFA, but somebody can still access that system without MFA. You have configured your system with some session management, but at the end of the day, that session management aren't working. So all those, we call them security misconfigurations. Yeah. So normally ensure that you close those loopholes. So sometimes also we have the default configurations that comes with the system. Are you able to define what are the default configurations and what are some of the other additional configurations that you can have on the system? So we have with this one, you can do the default configurations and patch systems, verbose errors or error messages. So in terms of exploitation, so definitely we will have unauthorized access to system and data. We will have exploitation of the default accounts and the credentials. So when you build your system, definitely kuna kwanga na zile ma default accounts, admin, sijui super admin, what, all those. Ensure that you have those accounts maybe during deployment. Ensure that those accounts are not part of which can easily be utilized by an end user. So information disclosure through error message as well. So what happens in terms of secure configuration? You do some hardening, of the system and even the application in terms of configuration. You implement automated configuration management, and also you do regular updates and patch. So usi build system, you build an HMI system, a system yenye hata kufanya updates ni ngumu. Yeah. So remember, vulnerabilities will zitaishi zikiwa. Yeah. Vulnerabilities will always be there. So if you today build a system that even we can't even upgrade it, we can't even, if we just upgrade, everything breaks. Yeah. You build a system which even we can't do patches. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we can't even, we identify a security loophole, we can't close that loophole. Becomes an issue. Yeah. So now cross-site scripting. So this one goes into the majorly the attacks where the malicious or the threat actors tries to inject some scripts on the application. Yeah. So we have they inject the malicious scripts into the content delivered to the user. So sometimes you realize, have you ever seen a website that at some point it has been hijacked, and then with successful scripts that have been injected, you end up having you can easily even log into a page and you see it's not within the website itself. It redirects you to external websites that at the end of the day will harvest your credentials. Yeah. So what happens with this one, the cross-site scripting, theft of session cookies? Yes. So we can have even some scripts that are within the website that the threat actor can implant these scripts, and then it will be just stealing the session cookies. Yeah. We recently had an issue whereby we have an auth application that's really a bad application. It does a lot of stealing tokens. We call it a perfect data software. So you authenticate to this application, but at the end of the day, the application itself will steal your data. Yeah. So finally, in terms of the techniques that you can use to prevent cross-site scripting, so you can implement an output on coding and encapsulating and capping. Escaping. And the other thing is on content security policy, so to restrict the source of script execution. Yes. So at the end of the day, do you have a control of whatever script that are executed within your application? So that now it's not only just any other script, but at least the scripts and you understand them. And at the end of the day, there is well defined in terms of content security policy within the application. And the other thing is validate and sanitize all user input. The insecure deserialization. So with this one, we go back also to the issue of untrusted data during application interactions. Yeah, so maybe within the API interaction, so there's an API that is querying data from your system, or there's an API that is querying data from another system. Do we have this channel well secured? Yeah, so that now at the end of the day, within the API communication, or within the API channel, we know that it is well secured. So that now we don't have any issue with data being hijacked, or any issue with data might end up having being corrupted, yeah, during transit. So with this one, we are talking about arbitrary code injections, bypassing authentications, and privilege escalations as well. So have you built a system whereby at the end of the day, somebody can easily do privilege escalation, somebody can easily bypass authentications? Yeah, so somebody can craft some inputs into the application, and they manage to successfully authenticate even without the normal authentication that you have built. So the impacts will lead to remote code execution, data tampering. Yes, so if I can easily hijack your API communication between the applications, I can easily tamper with that data, and you end up having some nodes. We tamper with the integrity of that data. The other thing is denial of service. Yes, we can have some API attacks that at the end of the day, or even the app interaction platform, you might end up even executing or generally overwhelming the whole system to system communication with a lot of traffic. So how do we mitigate this? You use safe serialization and deserialization libraries. So all these are built within our programming softwares. I believe Python will have one. Which other? All these, the C#, Java libraries, definitely they have all these. Yeah. So the other thing is implement strict input validation and data integrity checks. Yeah, I think I've seen these well implemented within a Java application. The other thing, avoid accepting serialized objects from untrusted sources. So those are some of the things that you can easily find them. The controls are built within the libraries of the software development platforms. Using components with non-vulnerabilities. So this is another risk. So for you, you just go use any library you download, you use it, yet maybe the library introduces vulnerabilities to your application. So these are some of the things that you really need to take care of. Whatever libraries that you are using, ensure that they are well tested. So you can just go to GitHub and then you find a library. You download that and you use it within your application. You don't know what are some of the other applications that the library is interacting with. So those are some of the risks that we have within the library domain. So this risk arises when software components that have known vulnerabilities are used in the application. So wewe unaitumia some libraries zenye ziko na vulnerabilities, well-known vulnerabilities, and your application becomes ultimately weak. So outdated libraries, frameworks, and even software components. So what happens in case of successful attacks on these components? We'll have compromise. We'll end up with compromised application and data, exploitation of non-vulnerabilities to launch attacks. Yes, definitely with a library and you may download, it's not verified. Where umeenda to GitHub, ume download a certain library, and that library, maybe you don't know the intentions of the user who built it, and you're just using it to integrate with the application. Where tu unatengeneza bora inafanya usiguze, bora inafanya usiguze, kumbe kutoguza ndio you are opening the door for the threat actors. So until you test your application, say that now at least you are confident with the libraries that you are using as well. So the other thing is on legal and regulatory repercussions. I've explained that as well. So how do you prevent this? So use tools like OWASP dependency check and sync to identify the vulnerable components. I've seen Sneak is an open source within GitHub. I think probably some of you might be even using it. Sneak. it's an open source within GitHub. So if you are if you are maintaining your codes within GitHub, you can easily scan your codes. Even you can easily scan your whole application within GitHub using this sneak. So, and then you adopt a software composition analysis, SEA approach. Yeah. So these are some of the things that you really need to look into. Now, the other thing which really helps in terms of whenever you have an issue with your application. Now, have you enabled some logging and monitoring? So this is key when it comes to security operations. So for an application, for us, whenever you are monitoring an application, we are interested on the logs. Are we able to generate authentication logs? Are we able to generate any activity logs within the application? And now, does your application have the capability of ensuring that it gives us logs that can detect anything anomalous within the application? Yeah, so that's another thing. So if if you are just building an application that doesn't generate logs, or it doesn't have logging capability, sometimes we call it auditing capability. So if your application does not provide audit trail, so that application at some point, even with the CBK requirements, if you are building a financial system or a financial application, they will require you to have your system generate audit trails, and those audit trails can easily be exported to a SIM and then maintained for a whole year. So we are looking of critical actions, or also inadequate monitoring of logs, or even missed alerts. So in case we do privilege escalation, so a normal user does something which is not authorized to be done by the normal user, does your system detect that? Does your system flag that as well? So those are some of the things that you need to ensure. So with OWASP, it will scan and it will tell you your system doesn't generate these logs. You need to configure this and this, and you end up having logging capability within your system. So with this one, you just implement comprehensive logging of security relevant events. Also use the SIM systems. That's now security team will come and tell you, we need these SIM alerts, we need SIM events, we need to push your logs to the SIM. And then the other thing is set up alerting mechanism for any suspicious activity. Now, let me talk of applications that have OWASP built into them, but they are at the infrastructure side. I talked of e-citizen being DDoSed, or generally being attacked last year. So the issue that when I reviewed and looked into what exactly happened is because e-citizen was initially deployed without a WAF. So we normally, with web applications, we have something called web application firewalls. So normally WAFs tries to counter a lot of security attacks, or generally application attacks. So with the WAF, anytime you deploy your application, ask yourself, is it behind a WAF? Because WAF will help you protect against most of the application attacks. So the issue that a citizen platform was not behind a WAF. So with a lot of requests, DDoS attacks, they were able to go through and overwhelm the system. Yeah. So these are some of the things. So you need to do a little bit research on, understand whenever you are deploying your application, am I deploying this application behind a WAF? So we have majorly, Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a very good WAF. Yeah, so that's a perfect example of a WAF. So whenever you deploy your application, is it behind a Cloudflare? So Cloudflare will protect against some things like DDoS and the rest. But definitely there are a number of things that maybe you need to subscribe for you to get additional capabilities for the WAF. The other thing, secure development lifecycle. So within your SDLC pipeline, or your application pipeline, are there security controls that you have implemented, secure coding standards, code reviews and static analysis? Are you doing we call them SAT and DSAT. So we have the static analysis, dynamic analysis. Those are some of the things that you really need to put into consideration. So whenever also you are integrating security into your software development lifecycle. So within the CI/CD pipeline, do you have a security check within the CI/CD pipeline? my voice is starting to disappear now. So the other thing is threat modeling. Yeah, so whenever you are building an application, or whenever you are coming up with, do you have kind of, have you built some threat models so that now you understand with this system, what are some of the threats modeling within my application? Yeah, so are you able to identify the assets that are within the application? Are you able to identify, analyze threats within the application, prioritize risk within the application, tools, methodologies of threat modeling? So that's a whole other domain. Yeah, so I know maybe at your level you might not be doing this, but when you get to these big organizations, you can be a specialist of just doing threat modeling of securing the applications. The other thing is on secure APIs. So we normally have some best practices whenever you are using APIs to have your application interact with other applications. Yeah, so have you considered some important API securities, some common vulnerabilities within API as well, and also look into the best practices for securing API authentication, rate limiting, input validations. So these are some of the things. Other application security, when you end up working in these big organizations like the banking sector, you can be a specialist of only API security. You are in control of all APIs within the organization. So kazi yako tu ni kuangalia API security, API vulnerabilities, API best practices, na unapewa pesa yako kulingana na kazi yenye unafanya within the API domain. Wewe hata udeal na mambo ya development. Wewe tu ukipewa application, kazi yako ni kutest tu APIs. Mwingine atatest vitu zingine, wewe tu kazi yako ni kutest APIs. Finally, we have got incident response. So definitely, do you have some capabilities of whenever your system gets attacked, are we able to take control of that system in a special way? So that now, once security team respond, are they able to kind of even have capability to detect something, contain, eradicate, and recover, and even do some post-incident. So sometimes wanasemanga, when you build an application, ensure that that application ile siku yenye itanyoroshwa, because definitely there's time inaweza nyoroshwa anytime. One thing about security is that you need to be prepared for an attack anytime, any day. Yes, any day, anytime. You need to be prepared for an attack. So does your application have the capability that ile siku itanyoroshwa, and does it mean we will have the capability of even at least could disable watu wanza wasikwe wana authenticate, maybe could disable admins, or maybe to take control of the admins? All those capabilities, are they possible? Yeah, so so there are a number of things you can do in terms of the Ansible lab. So you can do some SQL injections. You can test your application. Wewe mwenyewe unaweza try to do some SQL injections to your application. You can try to do some cross-site scripting to your application, and you can try to do some to see whether you have good secure authentication. You can try also to do some secure API development. So identify API vulnerabilities. Kama umepata iko na vulnerability, are you able to try and exploit that vulnerability ili uweze kujua how to protect it as well? So in summary, so we have looked into the OWASP top 10, importance of ongoing learning and staying up to date with the new threats. So definitely with applications, unajua any system today, you will have a new library. Tomorrow, the library is vulnerable. It means your system is vulnerable. You need to update that library and update your system as well. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is just be a good student who keeps learning on new technologies and new ways of protecting systems. Make OWASP top 10 your best friend. Anytime, sorry, anytime you are building an application, have I taken it through the OWASP top 10? Is it well secured? And that's how you can end up at least building secure applications. And ultimately, you might not be a continuous developer for life. You transition unakuja sasa security. unakuja unapiga kazi ya kusecure application. So kuna watu watadevelop, wang'ang'ane kudevelop, wewe tu unakuja unawaambia sasa mnipe API zote, you test the API security. Somebody else will come and test maybe authentications, encryptions, all those. So at the end of the day, you transition, you no longer be a developer, you become an application security. You will be doing application security assessments. Yeah. So any questions? So I think that marks the end of this presentation. So I don't know whether there's anybody who has got a question.
If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll give you the microphone. Okay, there seems to be no question. I hope this class has been insightful to everyone. For those of us who are using Node.js, so go to NPM, find out about security issues on some of those modules that we have. The module MySQL that we're using to connect to a database, is it vulnerable in any way? What are the fixes? And someone was asking me the other day, he deprecated inamaanisha nini? So you'll find that a module is deprecated. That means it's no longer being maintained, and it could eventually be vulnerable to some of the attacks, because as we continue to build applications, there are people out there who don't sleep, and the kazi yao ni kutafuta vulnerabilities, to look for weaknesses in systems and in those modules, so that eventually they can take advantage of those and attack big companies, because we saw like what we're using Node.js is being used by companies like Netflix. So if someone is able to just get a vulnerability within one of the Node modules and they're able to inject some code into a Node application, then eventually they're able to interrupt a whole big company. So as we continue to build applications, always be aware of the items that have been highlighted during this session. Thank you, Albert, for the time and for the effort and for the insights. Personally, I've also learned a lot. So any question from the class? Any question from the class? All right. So if there's no question, thank you for attending. I will see you in the next class. Albert, asante sana.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. So, and in case you have got any question, just anything, you can reach out to Albert, or you can reach out also to me, and then we'll be able to support you. We'll be able to support you guys.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone, and happy coding.